following podcast contains mentions of sexual assault and sexual abuse. Listener discretion is advised.
Cool girl. Men
Coming to you
always use
live
that,
from the
don't
dark
they, as their
basement. This
defining
is Kids From
compliment.
Yesterday podcast.
She's a cool girl.
Welcome back.
Welcome back.
Episode 4.
Episode 4.
It's pretty good going.
It is.
Look, you're here.
I made it. So today I didn't think I was going to make it. Again, this is the second time we've had an issue where I didn't make it to recording. But I cut my finger in a door hinge and I didn't know if I was going to make it because I was in so much pain.
Yeah, Clodagh's
A disaster.
Yeah, I was going to say something nicer. I didn't know what I was going to say, but it was going to be something nicer.
And then last week I was or it was 2
Week
weeks
before,
ago maybe.
yeah.
I was coming over to Courtney's to record and I was like, Courtney, I've got a really bad pain in my stomach. I'll just chill it out for a while. And I ended up getting my appendix taken out. So that escalated quickly.
Yeah, so we're here. We're here on
Made it.
episode 4. Clodagh's still alive. And today we're going to talk about something that I'm kind of nervous to talk about. And I'm nervous because there are people who are going to turn this off as soon as we say what we're talking about. And I think those are the people that really need to hear this.
I think so too.
So we want to talk about misogyny in emo music. And I feel like that's a really big part of the rock scene, and it has been for a really long time. And I think it's really, really important that no matter what you love or how much you enjoy something, you're feeling in a position to critically kind of look at it and go, well, you know what, I like this thing, but I don't like this thing about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's okay, and I think that's something we're really afraid of doing. Like, we live in, cancel culture, where sometimes it's warranted, and sometimes you're kind of like, you know what, you didn't give that person a chance to try be better.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like everybody needs a chance to try be better. But there seems to be a very pervasive issue.
Yeah, definitely across emo music. I mean, looking back at when we were, 15, 16, while I kind of recognised there was, somewhat an issue with the way women were spoken about in the music, I didn't really realise how prominent it was right across the scene. And I mean, if you look at music going back to, like Guns N' Roses, David Bowie, there's always, it's not just emo music. This is something that is across the music industry, even up as far as, Eminem's song Kim, like that is rampant with misogyny. We are going to look at the particulars of misogyny in the emo music scene. Now, as we were researching for this episode, there was one name who reappeared time and time again in every article we were reading, and that was Jessie Lacey.
Yeah, Jessie Lacey from Brand New. Were you a Brand New fan?
No, I kind of heard, the only time I really knew about them was when I would search for Brand New Eyes and Brand New would come up instead.
Right, yeah.
Whether on the internet or whatever. And then more recently when this whole kind of thing came out about Brand New and Jessie Lacey, that's when I kind of heard more about them. I think they were supposed to play in Dublin not so long ago. What are you saying that?
Yes, and I don't know if that show got, I think that show got pulled, so
Yeah.
they pulled the European tour. I did like Brand New. I wasn't a massive fan, but they were on all my sad playlists for when I felt super sad. And I'd seen them support Biffy Clyro a couple of years ago as well, and that was the first time I'd seen them live, and I thought they were shit live. Like, it was horrible, because especially as, like, I thought the music was really emotional, and it was really deep, and it was really whatever, but there's songs that I would have liked back in the day. We're not going to put these songs onto the playlist. Like, I feel bad if the rest of the band didn't know. I don't know. And obviously these are allegations we're talking about. I don't know if there's been a case brought against them, but considering he released a statement apologising for what he'd done, I'm pretty sure it's happened, so I don't want to give him any money.
Yeah,
And I don't want to subject people to these songs, but there's one called Me versus Elvis versus Maradona, and I'd heard it many a time.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I knew the lyrics to it, but I'd never heard it the way that he intended it, which is that it seems to be a song about date rape.
Yeah.
Which is really shitty. And a lot of his music kind of... Like, he'd written a song, and it was quite horrible, really, about... it was about, like, a male being raped.
Okay.
And, like, you know, it was a different perspective, and he wasn't kind of saying... Like, the song didn't seem to be saying, like, oh, you know, this happens to men too, like, trying to talk over women. It was just very much like this is a thing that does happen.
Okay.
Especially with guys and older girls. Which, yes, absolutely it does. But, like, I'd always heard that and thought, you know, maybe he kind of has a progressive take on things. No. Like, you hear those articles. I mean, we'd researched this independently, and over and over and over again, everything that comes up, it's Jessie Lacey, Jessie Lacey, Jessie Lacey. And I do think when I heard about this, it was like... I don't know, it was kind of devastating because it was around the time... And, like, I do want to talk about this separately on another episode, but I do think a lot of bands were kind of being outed as having done stuff. But I do think in this particular case, somebody who was kind of at the forefront of that second wave of emo, who had, like, an active fan base, who had done these really horrible things. Like, the articles are there as well. I really don't want to go into detail about what he is alleged to have done and what he's apologised for doing. Yeah. But it's horrible, and it's terrifying that this was such a big part of the scene. I mean, like, I feel like when I was a kid, I didn't think about this kind of stuff. You know, like, it was me and the band, and that was it. Like, there was nothing, you know, there was other people that liked the bands or whatever.
Yeah.
And, you know, the goal was always, like, I want to be friends with them, or I want them to, like, send me a tweet, or, like, I want to be noticed by them in some way.
Yeah.
Just so I can validate, like, my interest in this band is... valued by them, I guess. But, like, I'd never think, you know, this was a potential danger, this is something that could happen, because I trusted these people that I looked up to.
Definitely.
I think so. But at the same time, then, I guess we grew up in a time when people looked down on girls who like music.
Yeah.
Like, even the term fangirl.
Yeah, like, I feel like not only were we in a time where people looked down on girls for liking music, but there seemed to be sort of a superiority complex in people who didn't like the music you liked. They thought they were better than you because they were into Guns N' Roses, or they were into Metallica, real rock music, you know? And as much as, you know, that's great for them, but they definitely, I feel like I was looked down upon because I was into Paramore and I was into Team 86. And even, you know, up into, like, the 10s, fans of One Direction. It seems like these bands that are liked by young girls are almost delegitimatized by music critics simply because young girls like them.
Yeah. I mean, the most recent example of it I can think of, I was looking up Play Royale because I feel like my face had been, like, smashed over the head a few times with, you know... Like, they appeared out of nowhere a couple of years ago, and I remember I got, like, emails from Roxanne and from Kerrang being like, the new band, and, like, oh, it was last year, it was the new band of 2018, and I read this article, and it was a guy breaking, like, he was a music critic, but he was breaking down kind of who the band are. I have no interest in them at all whatsoever. I don't like, it feels very manufactured, but it was very much a case of, like, they were judging them and looking down on them because girls were going to love them.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's kind of the overarching thing. It's not about, like, necessarily whether the music is good or not. It's about, you know, oh, well, like, they're going to be huge anyway because teenage girls will love this kind of shit. And you're like, well, like, the shit that teenage girls love is great. I think we spoke about this in our first episode. Like, when I was a teenager, it was the first time that I ever loved anything.
Yeah.
So there was things that I attached myself to because I was like, you know what, I can love this with absolute, like, nobody can judge me for loving this. I can love this and I cannot talk about it and nobody will know that I love this thing. You know, so I loved Supernatural. I was really into that show, and, like, I loved different bands, and I loved Twilight, and I loved all this stuff that I could just throw myself into. And I could spend all my time reading interviews, or I could read the books, or I could read fan fiction, and I could, you know, there was so much in it that, like, this thing you could throw yourself into. So I do think that that concept of fangirling, you're supposed to think of, like, a 14-year-old girl with, like, the band's name drawn on her face in, like, eyeliner, wearing, like a bright pink, like, band t-shirt or whatever, whether or not it exists for the band, but you're supposed to think of this, like, child, and you're supposed to think, that child is immature and that like what they're interested in has no value, and they're going to be really embarrassed when they look back at themselves in a few years. And I think like, yeah, absolutely, we've looked back on ourselves and gone, oh my god.
Yeah, there's definitely some examples of that I have, but but
it's I think the expectation is that there's no value in you liking this thing because it's for girls and it's, you know, it's stupid, or it's not worth your time, or it's a waste of money and they don't care about you, and you know, they just want you to support them and like bolster them up or whatever. So, and like, while there is a degree of that obviously in every single industry, like some bands are manufactured in a boardroom and some bands start out authentically and then they're made into something else because the labels see the potential, they see the money making potential, and that happens everywhere. It happens in every industry. I do think it's another way of putting women down, basically.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even if you look back to the 60s and the kind of Beatlemania, and the majority of the stories we hear about Beatlemania are all about young girls, but if you look at them at this side, you know, on this side of their fame, and now that they're, you know, disbanded and half of them are dead, they are cited as one of the greatest bands of all time, and it's by white men, like it's older white men. I feel like they're the ones with the music superiority complex. But yeah, and another one, I think Twilight, the Twilight fangirls, we got such backlash. Yeah. We got treated so horribly because of a book series that we liked. And
like, yes, it was horribly misogynistic in
theory.
In theory and in nature. And when you look back at it now, you go, oh my god, what the fuck? Get out of my bedroom, you freak. Like, also, you're 107. Meet somebody your own age, you creep. Like, because the bit I can never get my head around, and I'm sorry for the segue, the bit I can never get my head around now as an adult is, what could he possibly have in common with a 17-year-old girl? Like, I know he died at 17, but he's lived for many years. Surely he's like, he's gained wisdom, and he knows things about the world. And she's like, I don't want to finish school. I want to be a vampire. And you're like, what? But at the same time, I still loved it. And like, even now, I'm like, I don't feel embarrassed about loving it. I feel very much like I watched Twilight again recently, and I still love it the way I loved it before. Like, I don't feel the same about it, but I definitely can feel the same feelings I felt. Yeah. It's like the same excitement and the same kind of, you know, this is a thing that's for me. And it was female dominated. There were male Twilight fans, but it was very much a thing of like, it's like, how dare you like this thing that was made for you. And I think that is the problem. It's like, how dare you enjoy something that was created with you in mind.
Yeah, definitely. I remember, I think, like, Twilight, I know this is such a segue, but Twilight for me was like the first time I had read a book series and it was turned into a film. So that excitement for me of being like, oh my god, this is a thing that happens. Like, obviously I'd seen films and, you know, there was books about them. About the films?
Obviously you'd seen films.
I'd seen films where there was books, they were based on books, but this is the first time where I'd read a book and then it was made into film. So obviously, like, my friend and I, we still, like, I think I have like 3 copies of Eclipse at home because, you know, I bought the series, then I was like, okay, let's rewatch this again, this will be fun, and then I bought it again, and then she bought it, and, you know, I like, love Twilight. I would still go back and watch.
Oh yeah, like, I think there's something in that, but I think that is our point, that it was made for us. Yeah. For when we were that age. And I think a lot of these bands, they're made for women. And this is a newer, like, I suppose more of the pop punk stuff that's out now. So you have like 5 Seconds of Summer that was like manufactured to be, like, they were like part owned by One Direction. So they were literally found and manufactured into being this thing that was for teenage
emo One Direction.
Yeah, but they were like found and made into this thing that was for teenage girls. And I don't think there's any harm in liking that. But then you have like this coming on from kind of the first and second wave of emo bands, which were for men, and they were about girls, and they were about how like wronged they'd been by women, and like, you know, these unattainable female creations. So I think something that keeps coming up, and I read a book called Under My Thumb, and it's Songs That Hate Women and the Women Who Love Them, and it's an essay collection edited by Rian Jones and Eli Davies, or Ellie Davies, I'm not sure which, I'm really sorry. But it has like a part in it about the cool girl monologue from the Gillian Flynn book, Gone Girl. So we played a little clip of it at the beginning of this, but like, being the cool girl means I'm hot, brilliant, funny woman who adores football, poker, dirty jokes, and burping. who plays video games, drinks cheap beer, and loves threesomes. So it's like this, you think back to bands that we would have grown up hearing. So like Busted and McFly, like they had, Air Hostess and, Five Colours in Her Hair, and like all these nameless women who were just so like
cool.
Yeah, like they were awesome, and they're in the videos. They're all like thin and like conventionally pretty, but like also I wouldn't recognize them in the street either. Like they're like a very specific type of forgettably pretty girl that featured in all of these videos. And then in emo songs, you have the "Cute Is What We Aim For" song, like "Curse of Curves," and like you watch the video and you're like, where are her curves? Like, she has boobs. Did you mean boobs? Did you mean, like, like, what are you talking about? But it's, again, that same thing, like, I wouldn't recognize her if she walked past me in the street. But it's that kind of, like, oh, I think she's really cool. So it's like a fantasy thing, nearly, where people project, these emo bands project what they want in a woman onto women they kind of know, or that they saw, or that they met in a bar, or that, like, they don't really know, and they put all these like, oh, they're going to be really cool, and they're going to solve all my problems, and they're going to, have all my interests, and they're going to be so impressed by me being in a band, or on the flip side, they're going to be so unimpressed by me being in a band that's going to make me want them more, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then a lot of these songs end up being about them being turned down or like let down by these women. Like a lot of them kind of talk about cheating, and like obviously I don't condone cheating in any way, shape, or form. But it seems to be less about the cheating and more of like an excuse to call them a whore, or an excuse to say they're a slut because they slept with other people, or like it's an excuse to kind of say, you disappointed me for not being all the things that I thought you were going to be, rather than an actual realistic look at women. But I think that is kind of a thing that when you grow up in a culture where all the songs you're listening to are about girls that don't have names, that are just cool, you're like, they're so much better than you, because obviously they're not real women.
Yeah.
They're not talking about anybody that...
So first of all, they're faceless, they're not human to you, it's just a girl. So for women, I think that creates the sense of them versus us, like internalized misogyny. So like, as a woman listening to these songs about other women and the way they act, you're like, you're thinking, well, that's them and that's their behaviour, but that's not how I behave myself. And in that in itself is, slut shaming. But it's also got this kind of idea as well on the flip side for men who are listening to this music. They're influenced by what they're hearing, and, their heroes are saying X, Y, and Z, and, they're calling women sluts and whores, and they think it's okay to do it. But in Mean Girls, not okay. You gotta stop calling each other sluts and whores.
Exactly.
So, it's kind of it's these lyrics being in these songs is having an impact on women, projecting on women, and it's having an effect on the men projecting on women again. So it's a lose-lose situation for both sides of the coin. Definitely.
And then you have like when people do call out the misogyny that's there. I mean, Jessica Hopper has come up time and time again. She wrote an article back in
2003.
In this article, she quoted somebody talking to her about, so she's a rock music critic, and at the time she was writing a column about how emo is sexist.
Mm-hmm.
And then she quoted somebody saying to her, what do you mean emo is sexist? Emo songs are no different than all of rock history than Rolling Stones or Led Zeppelin. And then they kind of went on to say that if you have a problem with emo, you have a problem with all of rock history. And she was like, I know, I do. And a lot of the points in Under My Thumb were about how there has to come a point where you have to acknowledge what you're willing to ignore. And like, at what point are you going to go, well, this is not okay. Or I'm going to call this out. Or I'm not going to support this particular thing. Or I'm not going to support this song because I don't agree with it. And I think that's really difficult. And I think it's difficult because for a lot of girls, you're pigeonholed into this thing where you're told like you're a fangirl and your opinion doesn't matter, and you're making them money and stuff, and you're holding on to this thing that you love so tightly because you're like, well, no, this is mine, and this is like, like teenagers are rebellious like by nature. So they're holding on to this like little corner of rock music that they've kind of carved out, that they're like, I'm emo and I feel seen by these bands.
Mm-hmm.
And then the band does something to upset them, and it's like, well, do I keep holding on or do I let go now? Am I just doing what everybody wants me to do? I think there's a lot of kind of moral issues involved in it. But I do think it's really important to kind of critically look at it as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. And on the kind of the subject of how much are you willing to ignore, I guess there's been so many like in the cancel culture that we're living in at the moment, like there are so many bands that have had to pull tours and pull shows because of accusations of sexual misconduct against women. And, you know, really, for me, I guess I'd say I'm lucky in the sense that not many of my favourite bands have been touched by this whole, by Me Too. But obviously there is still a fear there, and I guess if something was to come out about one of them, I would 100% back down, and I, you know, wouldn't be as interested in the band anymore. I mean, there's accusations about Jared Leto from 30 Seconds to Mars, and you know, as much as I like them, but I haven't really, you know, I would be reluctant to listen to their music or give them any money anymore because we don't know what exactly is happening there. And I guess as well with Lost Prophets, I always hated them. And when Ian Watkins was outed and eventually jailed on allegations that there was a case brought against him for sexual abuse and sexual assault, a lot of people backed away from that I knew who were Lost Prophets fans had kind of stepped away and said enough is enough. But is that the only point where we say to bands, you know, I'm not going to listen to you anymore because of your sexual misconduct or the sexual allegations against you? Or is there other scenarios where that would happen? Like, for example, I think we talked about this before, Paramore, not one of those crazy, or what's the song called?
One of those crazy girls.
One of those crazy girls. Like, I don't condone that song. I skip it every time I hear it or every time it comes on. But I'm not going to, you know, as much as Hayley pulled Misery Business from their live set, I feel like there is an opportunity for them to acknowledge the damage that song may have caused.
Yeah.
And I think there's an opportunity there for them to rectify it. And again, if they come out and said, no, absolutely not, we're not pulling this song, it is what it is, I might take a bit of distaste to that. Yeah. But again, I'm not 100% ready to let go of them. So I can see what you mean by that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think even, like, post-Me Too, people were kind of calling out different things about bands they didn't like. And again, that's the bravery of, like, a teenage girl going, you know what, actually, I don't like this thing that this band has been doing. So, like, at All Time Low shows, and they've been doing this forever, girls throw bras up on stage. But it's not like the bra you're wearing. People bring bras to throw on stage. Which when I explain to people who haven't been to an All Time Low show, it sounds fucking bizarre.
It does. Bras are expensive, man.
No. But you're talking like pennies bras.
Yeah.
But still, like, you know, they do like a €3 like t-shirt bra.
Yeah.
But I digress. But people were kind of saying like that was cute and funny when they were like, you know, in their teens themselves. And now you're like, you have 30-something-year-old men and 15-year-old girls throwing bras up on stage. And you're like, well, there's an opportunity for boundaries to be blurred. And to be honest, I was kind of thinking about it quite a bit. And yeah, I think I agree that there is, you know, do I think it's so unacceptable that I wouldn't go to a show anymore? No, because they don't, it's not acknowledged anymore. It's kind of phased out. Like, people don't do it as much anymore. Yeah. And I think part of that is because they've stopped encouraging it. Because they're not in their 20s anymore. They're adult men.
They're married adult men.
Married adult
men. As much as they might not like their wives.
Shade. But like as much as that is the case, I feel like it's kind of being phased out as well. And there's a lot of like childish things. Like, people are talking about Blink and how like their whole thing is really childish. And like they say kind of shitty things on stage too. But they're making like tit jokes and dick jokes. And yeah, like when you're getting older and your fan base is kind of staying the same age, you kind of have to think about, like, what are the implications of this? Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, well, if you know that the boundary is, like, you can make a joke about that, but you couldn't touch somebody in the crowd. Or you couldn't, like, you know, like, I think once the boundaries are really clearly there and that everybody is willing to call out somebody if that boundary is crossed. But I do think that that's the important thing here is, like, thinking about what's acceptable to you and where do you draw the line and what do you do to protect that line as well. And I do think as a community, people have a responsibility to call out stuff that they see or that they don't like. I see it constantly, people getting like calling out stuff that happens at gigs, and I think it's happening more and more frequently where people are saying, you know what, this is not cool. And it could just be the fans and not the bands themselves. But it's still, there's now a culture of people going, you know what, actually I saw this shitty thing and I reported it. And that's great. Yeah. Like, I think it's really great.
Yeah, it's very progressive, even in the sense of accessibility and things happen in the crowd. Like, when we were both at the Mythics gig when they played Dublin a while back, and you know, Josh Franceschi called out from the stage because there was two guys fighting in the middle of the show, and he was like, this is not cool, like, don't do this. And it's very easy for bands to put those boundaries in place, whether it's, you know, a chat like that on the stage, or it's like Paramore when they were doing their Parahoy. We spoke about this in our Paramore episode, go listen if you haven't. But they have very clearly set out these boundaries for being on a ship with them, and it works, and it works so well, and the fans really respect that. So it's not like these bands have difficulty in setting these boundaries. It's just about executing it in the right way. So I definitely feel like there should be a case of that more.
One particle of unobtainium has a nuclear reaction with a flux capacitor. Carry the two, changing its atomic isotoner into a radioactive spider.
Yes, science!
So I have 2 articles this week. It's about misogyny in music. So there was a research paper done by Greta Meyer-Hollingdale, and I think it's pronounced Trotmashak, but I could be saying that completely wrong. I'm very, very sorry. But this was in 2015, and it was about how listening to music with pro-equality lyrics improves attitudes and behaviour towards women. So it had a really small sample size. There was like 55 participants, which is not a lot because you've like, I think it was 27 women, 28 men. And what they did basically was they repeated this experiment later on with a different group of people, but around the same amount. Mm-hmm. And they played Respect by Aretha Franklin, and they played Respect by Train. And so one group had the pro-equality lyrics and one group had the non-pro-equality song, and then they were asked to fill in a questionnaire. And the questionnaire had questions that were kind of a sensitive nature, so about like victim blaming women, or like if a woman gets hit in a relationship, should she leave, kind of thing. And they were asked to fill in this questionnaire, and they found that people who listened to the pro-equality lyrics were more likely to be more sympathetic towards women. So there's problems with this study where there weren't enough people in it, so they're going to have to do this again with a bigger sample to see how it actually relates to people. This may have just been this group. And I think this is a problem in psychology research a lot. You see this in papers all the time. You know, psychology proves or science says, and you're like, science doesn't say shit. Like, no, it fucking doesn't.
50 people said it.
Yeah, 50 people said it. Or these 3 researchers interpreted this data to say the thing that they wanted them to say. And that's like my biggest peeve when you read, like, those Twitter accounts are like, psychology says.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, it doesn't. But maybe a study said it, or like one person tweeted it, and you know, there's a lot of stuff that needs to.
It's on the internet, Courtney. It's real, obviously.
It's true. But that is something that really, really pisses me off, and I feel like the further I got into learning about this stuff, the more it annoyed me, because I'm just like,
yeah.
But why? But I think in this case, there's an issue where if you do a psychology research, or any kind of research where you're relying on a person to self-report, so they're filling in a questionnaire or they're answering questions, there's a thing called demand characteristics, where if you kind of stand in front of somebody and you give them a questionnaire and they think, so either that person wants you to believe that they're a good person, so if it's a questionnaire about like stealing or something, well, they're like, well, even if I do steal, I want this person to think that I'm a good person, and this is clearly what they're trying to research. Or if they're answering something about like, you know, for example, like the correlation between wearing black and depression, they might be like, well, clearly if they're asking me questions about the clothes I wear and depression, that they want to show that there's a link. So they might answer the questions and say that, yes, there is, even if they don't personally feel that there is. So this was, in this study, they did a kind of there's things you can do to try get rid of that. So you might ask somebody, like, what do you think the study is about?
Okay.
After they filled in the questionnaire. And then they can kind of go, well, this person figured it out, or this person figured out what it is they were being asked to do, and that kind of limits how many people are participating in a study that are likely to respond in that kind of way, where they think you want them to answer a certain way. So apparently only one participant in this study indicated any suspicion between listening to the songs and answering the questionnaire, so they didn't know what they were being asked to do, which is really interesting and really good, and it shows kind of a strength for the study.
Yeah, definitely.
So there's already been research that suggests that media's attitude to women affects how people feel about women. But if we're actually looking at songs and how people are influenced by the music they're listening to and how they treat women, like, I feel like that's quite a systemic problem. Like, you can go through all the songs that we were talking about, this cool girl image, but you have bands like The Story So Far and Real Friends writing like sad songs about breakups and stuff, and how, you know, these women are really terrible and they broke their hearts and everything. And like, you know, breakups are hard, and they're, you know, it's valid to feel sad about them. And like, I'm not saying like we should police how people talk about the specific situations they're in, but I think coupled with the idea of this faceless, nameless girl, it becomes about like not that girl that they're talking about. It becomes about any girl.
Yeah.
And anybody can relate their experience to it. and I know we've mentioned this in a previous episode, but that idea of people hearing what they want to hear in a song.
Yeah.
That, like, if you specifically don't name them, or you call them, like, that bitch, or, like, that you know, that whore, that slut, or whatever, people hear what they want to hear, and they hear it about, like, that girl wouldn't go out with them, or that girl broke up with them, or...
Yeah.
It kind of influences how people feel about women. And then, you know, you go to shows and are girls being, like, mistreated in the crowd? Or are people touching them? Or, you know, is stuff happening to them while they're there? And I do think it kind of fosters this experience that isn't necessarily positive, where they're at these shows and they should be safe because they're holding on to this thing that they're fangirling over. But if there's men there and other boys their age there, are they treating them wrong because of what they're hearing? Is this just a culture? Is, you know, there's a lot of questions around that whole concept, I think, of what happens when you have misogynistic lyrics in your songs. Another article I read was by Riles in 2013, and it's Emo Angst, Masochism and Masculinity in Crisis. So I've always had this thing about how I thought emo kind of represented this, like, kind of feminine, kind of androgynous thing where, like, you wouldn't necessarily know if you saw, like, an original emo with the black sweeping fringe and the face piercings and the eyeliner, whether they presented as male or female.
Yeah.
And this article kind of discusses this in detail about how emo is a very, like, feminized, androgynous aesthetic. So the article says that the standard emo style is reflective of traditional assumptions of gay aestheticism associated with femininity or androgyny. And I do think that that's true. Like, you kind of saw a lot of expression of, like, queerness, I guess. Like, growing up, so, like, you know, Pete Wentz, people were like, oh, is he not gay, kind of thing. But, like, there was also a genuine question about his sexuality. And then you had, like, Frankie and Jared kissing on stage. And there was, like, this, like, exploration of queerness and of the idea of LGBT. And I think, like, kind of as emo has progressed into this, like, current wave of emo, a lot of those kids are LGBT, and they're much more free to express their sexuality. And I think there's less of a emphasis on this, like, traditional idea of androgyny, because I think that's a lot of things that people who are, like, in the body positive community and who talk about, like, being non-binary, that androgyny means that when people say they're non-binary but they have boobs, or they have, like, a curvier figure, or they are fat, or they're in a bigger body, or they don't look the way people think androgyny looks, that the people are like, but you know, but, like, you look like male, or you look female. Whereas I think emo kind of had this, like, subversive look at masculinity where it was all very, like, straight up down thin. And I think, like, Hayley Williams kind of fit into that as well, because that was like, oh, it's a girl, but she fits into our, like, assumption of what all emos look like, so, like, you know, it's fine. So here they also said that like, physical attributes such as muscular, athletic build are widely viewed as natural masculine qualities, so that emos actively challenge this naturalness by maintaining a thin, non-muscular form. So, like, I don't think for the most part that a lot of these bands gave a shit about, like, maintaining it. I think they just became popular because they were, like, naturally in thinner bodies. So, like all the Fall Out Boy guys, but even, like, I know we're going to talk about this, we're going to do a thing about body positivity at some point, and, like, claphobia in emo, but you said it before we started recording, we used to call Patrick Stone Patrick. Yeah. Like, that was normal, and we'd laugh about it. And
Josh from Tresky, Fat Josh, because, you know, he was a bit chubbier when, air quotes, when You Music started out. Like, and we thought that was fine. And I've said this before, but, like, I was, like, a size 18. I was, like, a fat teenager. I was a fat emo. And I always felt so, like, I don't belong here because I'm not this skinny, thin person. And I've, you know, spoken to Courtney about this before, like, off the podcast, but I was always this kind of person who would hold myself in a certain manner to try and fool people into thinking I was thin. And it came especially when we would go to these emo shows, and because I wanted so badly, as you do when you're a teenager, is to fit in. And I think there's this idea as well with emo that you're, like, supposed to be non-conforming, but, like, also look like everybody else, which is definitely not what I was trying to do. I just wanted to fit in. I didn't want to stand out. But another thing as well is that when you're in a bigger body and you're looking on stage at these tiny bodies and majority men, and they're playing these instruments and they're front men, and then you've got somebody like Hayley Williams who's a front woman, I desperately wanted to play drums when I was a teenager, but I thought, oh, I'll never make it as a drummer because, you know, I'm not thin, or I'll never make it as a lead singer because I can't, first of all, I can't sing, but second of all, I don't fit into that stereotype. So I never touched a drum kit, and I've decided this is the year, guys. This is the year. I'm going to do it because I'm not getting any younger.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't have taken me 10 years to decide that. I should have been able to just had those role models then and there and went with it.
Yeah, and I do think that's a really common thing as well. Like, I know we said this off the podcast, but, like, you hear of, like, female drummers or, like, female guitarists who ultimately are guitarists and drummers. And, you know, they might post YouTube videos and people are like, oh, you're a really good guitarist for a girl.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, like, she could fucking wipe the floor with you. Like, go away. Like, what can you do apart from, like, play with yourself? Like, just actually, like, it really pisses me off. But anyway, back to Riles. She said that emos violate gender norms, which may in turn cause them to feel pressure to enact forms of hypermasculinity, specifically by showcasing dominance over girls. And this is the point that I have been trying to make for a really long time, and I feel quite validated that it's here.
Good.
I feel... Thank you. I feel so valid.
I feel so seen.
I feel that in emo, a lot of... Because of the way the men looked, and it is this kind of feminized thing, and you have guys kind of kissing on stage, or... You know, there's a lot of queer baiting, and that's another episode entirely where we talk about kind of the problematic part of that. But you have this thing of like, well, the men are seen as feminine, so people who were emo or identified as emo were like insulted and told that they're gay, and like that was used as a pejorative.
Yeah.
Or like the F word, and I don't mean fuck, was used kind of like really liberally. Like you see, you know, like that was kind of a synonymous. Like you say emo, somebody says the F word.
Yeah.
And, you know, men wearing nail polish and stuff, like it was just constantly like their sexuality was questioned.
Yeah.
Because they identify with this thing that was kind of seen as being a little bit softer. So I do think maybe from that, and this is obviously what Riles thinks as well, that if you feel, and I think this is we're kind of getting into sociology now, but it's like, if you have a group of people who feel disenfranchised, and there is another group of people who are lower than them in the chain of like hierarchy.
Okay.
Like I think the best example of this is like you look at all the Irish people who went over to New York in the famine, and then when they were there, it was like no Irish, no Jews, no blacks. Irish people started being racist.
Yeah.
And like anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
And that was because they were like, well, we're disadvantaged here, but we still think we're better than these people. And I think that happens in a lot of social situations where people feel the need to kind of go, well, at least I'm not them kind of thing. So I do feel like in the emo scene there is kind of a case of like, well, people are saying all these horrible things about me and questioning whether or not I am, like, you know, they're questioning my sexuality and they're questioning this heteronormative thing. I think it's less of an issue now, but part of it still remains.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think then they kind of treat women badly because they're like, well, at least we're better than you.
Yeah, it's kind of like bullies are bullied themselves almost. And I definitely think with the whole nail polish thing you said, Lil Peep, not to be confused with Lil Pump, he wore nail varnish and a lot of people questioned his sexuality because of it, but he was kind of like, I'm just who I am and I like nail varnish and I'm a straight guy, I think. And
why are we gendering makeup
nail varnish
in 2019?
I think my first brush with like gender fluidity and non-binary and androgyny was definitely through the emo scene, and particularly through Pete Wentz. You know, he wore eyeliner, guyliner, as they penned it in Kiss magazine, and nail varnish, and it was just like, yeah, whatever. He's a dude and wears nail varnish. Yeah, so what of it? Like,
you look at now and how you have so many male beauty influencers who like wouldn't have got. I mean, like obviously Jeffree Star, you know, he was around back in the day. Oh yeah. And now he's huge. Like he has his own brand. He has. I'm sure everybody knows all about him, and he's problematic at best.
Yeah.
But for again, probably another episode. But for the most part, like that, he was around back in those days, and now it's so normal for guys to be wearing makeup, but it's less questions. Like there's, you know, more conservative people who might be like, why? But for the most part, I think it's, you know, like there's people working in brands and stuff that wear makeup all the time, and like, you know, people are looking for male makeup artists, and I feel like it's changed so much from back then when wearing eyeliner was a reason to question somebody's sexuality, or wearing skinny jeans was a reason. Like, I mean, it's ridiculous when you think back in it now, but that was the culture we were submerged in. That was what we kind of had grown up around. So they said that emo offers a collective solution to the confrontation of oppressive structures. But it does seem to be that if somebody is, I suppose, questioning your sexuality at a time when being gay wasn't seen as okay, and there was no such thing as, like, I mean, obviously there was, but like there was no such thing as somebody being able to say that they were bi and have people take them seriously.
Yeah.
I feel like that was a really big problem back in the day. But if you kind of question that with people who are insecure about their sexuality, maybe because it's being questioned or because they feel like they need to prove something to somebody, that they're going to try to uphold those kind of oppressive structures. So this whole thing was kind of in like a sociology think piece, I guess. And a lot of it was kind of focused on blaming girls, and they kind of looked as well. There was another article I read that kind of fed on from this a bit, where they talked about how, like, if you go back to Jesse Lacey and all his like lyrics about how, like, you know, the women are so terrible, and like, you know, I am nothing, and I am so sad, and like all of these things are really terrible. What you end up doing when you take those kind of lyrics and you take those kind of stances where you go, well, I am the most oppressed in this group, is you end up centering yourself in the discussion. So like by doing that, they just kept centering this like heteronormative, like hegemonic thing. Yes, sad man thing, who was like, I am the most suffering, like you might be suicidal, but I am the most suicidal kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or I am the most like misunderstood, or I am the most at risk here, or, you know, it was just a way of recentering this thing, and I feel like that's something that we accepted quite readily, because a lot of what we had were male bands. We only had Fall Out Boy, and we only had My Chem, and we only had Blink, and we only had Green Day, and we only had like Good Charlotte, and we only had like, I don't know, Dashboard, Hawthorne Heights. You can go back and back and back through all the different waves of emo music, and the majority men. And you made a really good point actually about
me? Good point.
Never. Always. Clodagh very smart. But you made a really good point about what Hayley said about female fronted bands.
Oh yeah, so we were talking about this off pod, but Hayley Williams has made a point numerous times that female fronted is not a genre. Like, people do kind of see her, this is something we've talked about before, but people see her as the band, as Paramore, because she is a woman. And would they have the same kind of, I guess they would have, you know, if it was a male fronted band, I do think the dynamic would change with regards to their fan base, because not only the point what you made, not only the point that you made about them fighting for attention from the different people, but I also think, like, I would be someone, and, you know, I hate myself for saying this, but I listen to a lot of female fronted bands, and I'd only kind of listen to women in music. Like, I would, obviously there are, you know, male fronted bands that I love and adore, but the majority of the time our playlists are made up of women and female fronted bands, because that's just what I'm into. And I kind of argued with the logic behind what Hayley was saying, like female fronted isn't a genre, and in my head I was thinking, well, it kind of is, because that's all I listen to. But then when I kind of took a step back and looked at it with my feminist goggles, I kind of realised that, yeah, female fronted isn't a genre, because it's just music. Yeah. Like, is male fronted a genre? No, it's not. So female fronted shouldn't be one either.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think, see, I don't listen to that many female fronted or female bands. And like, I de-question that. I'm like, well, what is it about this music that I don't like?
Yeah.
Like, is that internalized misogyny? Is that I'm just not interested? Is there a duty for me to like try expand that into, I mean, I did it with authors, I do it with films like directed by women and stuff. Like, I kind of try to look into this stuff that maybe I internally was rejecting because society rejects them, or they kind of go, well, it's not actually that big a deal, or whatever. And there's bands that I keep meaning to listen to that like I should. But I think last year, All Time Low posted it was Alex Gascard. He posted a photo. I know we keep coming back to this. I'm just like, Alex Gascard, not again. Take a shot every time I say Gascard. But he posted a photo of the band, like all the crew from one of their tours, and they'd taken Hey Violet out with them on tour. And he'd been like waxing lyrical all week about like, oh, it's so important to support women in music, blah 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 blah. And it's only meh because you look at this photo of the whole crew, and there's 3 girls in Hey Violet and no other women. Everybody else was male, or like, you know, male presenting, and you're kind of like, well, And people called him out, and he had a fucking bitch fit about it, because he always does when he's called out for stuff, when he thinks he's doing the right
Just
thing.
probably regularly, because he's a dickhead.
He really annoys me. I love you, but I hate you. That's like kind of my relationship with that whole band.
She says as she sits here wearing an All-Time Low t-shirt.
The same one I wore last week as well when we recorded.
And they have bras on their head as well, which I like to mention. They all have All-Time Low t-shirts on.
Yeah, isn't that really cool? That's why I like this
Fucking
shirt.
losers. I know.
They didn't design it
It's
themselves.
like 5 All-Time Low t-shirts in one.
Yeah, I feel represent. Anyway, I hate you. Love me. After he had his bitch fit, he brought, well, not him, but like the whole band brought Ashley Osbourne out on tour. She's a photographer. And like they've been friends with her. It's not like they found a woman and they were like, you woman, please come on tour with us. It was an opportunity that they had, and they had the space there. But it was so easy for them to do that. She's an incredible photographer. She's toured with like tons of bands. She's photographed like so many people. And it's not hard to find women who work in the industry, but it's kind of a case of like, you can't just be like, we're going to support women when you're talking about like female fronted bands. You need to be talking about everybody.
Yeah.
Like, you know, there needs to be women who are like session musicians who can be drummers or who can be guitarists. Panic at the Disco have a bassist, and her name is Nicole Rowe. And like, even that's really unusual. Why is that so strange that people would take session musicians out that are female? Like,
yeah, it wasn't something I seen at concerts back in the day. Like when we were going to these gigs and they needed like touring musicians, for the likes of Paramore especially, who always needed touring musicians because they were always breaking up when people were leaving. But they always had men. Now, in fairness to them, they were, I guess, men they knew, but I would assume that Hayley had female friends in the industry who would have been up to the job.
I do think there's still this prevailing idea that, and it's been around since the fucking 70s, like this idea that women are out to trick men. And it's like, right back to the thing we said at the very beginning about how there's all these men who like see this woman and they might see her at a bar, or they might see her in the crowd, or I think Brendan Urie talks about this a lot with his wife. Like, he met her at a show and she was so unimpressed by him, and then he was like desperate to get her to love him.
Yeah.
And like they're married and they're happily married and like it worked out for him. But that's such a prevailing common story. Well, back in the 70s there was an idea that like women can't be trusted because they've tricked men with like a disguise, or like, you know, they wear makeup and perfume and they're trying really hard. And this actually reminded me of a time in 2012. This dude that I'd met him in college. No, it was 2013, really early 2013, and I'd met him in college. And like, he'd had a girlfriend at the time, so I was just kind of like, cool, yeah, whatever, we'll be friends. And like, I never told him I liked him or anything. Like, it was just a thing. And then he like resurfaced a few months later and was like, broke up with my girlfriend. Do you want to like hang out? But like, I made it really clear we were hanging out as friends.
Yeah.
And it was like the day after Valentine's Day as well. So he turned up outside my job with a box of chocolates and a rose. And like, 2 of my friends used to walk me out every day, and they saw him, looked at me, and fucking walked off. And I was like, this is the worst day of my life. And like, he kept trying to like hold my hand and stuff, and I was like, we made this very fucking clear, we're meeting up as friends. And like, I think he tried to kiss me a couple of times, and I was just like, well, bye. So
yeah.
I managed to escape this whole thing, and it was really horrible and really embarrassing and really terrible. But like, a week later he sent me an essay he'd written, and he was like, oh, I just want to show you this thing I've written. And I found it quite recently. I look back and it's still there, even though I blocked him because I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? But it was a thing about how women are always trying to trick men. Like, they go out to bars and they wear like, you know, their little dresses and their heels and their makeup, and like, you know, they're wearing Spanx and like push-up bras and stuff, and they giggle and they laugh at everything you say, and then like a few weeks later they get more comfortable, and like the whole thing was like, it's a crumbling facade. And I was like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Like, why would you? And this is like, I wasn't as feminist then as I am now. Yeah. Like, I feel like now I would have like actually gone to his house and clattered him around the head.
Yeah, I was just thinking some sort of physical anger there.
Yeah, like some
sounds
sort
good.
of like shoe involved rage.
Jesus.
But like, at the time, I looked at the messages and I was like, you know what, baby Courtney, like that was pretty good going. I just said to him, I was like, why would you send me that? Like, what are you talking about? And he goes, oh, my sister told me not to send it to you. And I was like, fucking listen to her then. Also, why are you showing this to anybody? But it reminded me of that there is this prevailing thing that some men still think women are like, I don't know, like tricksters or like
scammers.
Yeah, or like elves or something, that we're like, you know, trying to trick you into
falling in love with us and then
Yeah, so it's just like the whole like fairy tale, like fairy thing, like you're in the unseelie or the seelie court, and then if you eat some like fruit that they offer you, you have to stay there forever. Like, is that what men think? Like, not all men, obviously, but like these men think.
Yes.
And that does seem to be a prevailing thing in a lot of these sad boy lyrics, that they're like, well, the woman tricked me by walking by or looking at me with her eyes, kind of thing, and you're just it's ridiculous. But it seems to be in so many bands. Like, I found a fuck ton of songs that feature this kind of thing, either the cool girl thing or it's like Make Done Sure by Taking Back Sunday. Lying is the most fun a girl can have
without taking off her clothes.
Yeah. And even I Write Sins, like, I know, like, since then Brennan fucking hates that song. He hasn't said he's not going to sing it anymore, but he's pretty fed up with it. Like, he lets the crowd do that as well.
Yeah.
But like, he made 6, Save It for the Bedroom, you know, calling girls whores. Like, it just seems to be like a thing. There was a Saves the Day song called Rocks Tonic Juice Magic. Dirty Little Secret, All American Rejects. Man Overboard have a song that's called Fantasy Girl, which kind of tells you everything you need to know about them as a band. But they do have a song called Montrose that I love. But again, it's the same thing. Like, you know, she was chilling looking hot in her bed smoking pot, and you're like, oh, she's so cool.
She's so cool.
But it was like, you know, when I go around your house, you hide all the things that other boys give you because you're so cool and unattainable. And you're just like, well, that's not healthy. What are you doing? Why are you wasting your time? Who else had songs? Mayday Parade, When I Get Home You're So Dead. And then like Real Friends, who they can fuck off. And The Story So Far have an album that I was reading a subreddit, and it was like, this was like the angry breakup album. But like The Story So Far, Parker Cannon has kicked somebody off a stage for like trying to get up there to stage dive. So I already thought it'd be straight out. I've already written an article about
like,
how much
physically kicked them off the stage.
Not just like told her off or was like get off the stage or whatever. He literally kicked her because she got up to stage dive, and other people have been doing it. It's not like she just decided. You know, like, I feel like if somebody gets up and tries to attack you, you're fully within your rights to do whatever the hell you want. But I feel like you have security at your shows.
For a reason.
Yeah, or you can just go, stop, get the fuck off my stage, thank you very much, and start the song up again. Like, there's plenty of ways you can handle that without kicking it. You only have to look at the attitude a lot of fans of these bands have to kind of see that there is an issue there still. That when people call out, like, the Parker Cannon thing, like, I had people going, oh, would it be okay if it was a guy? And I was like, fuck no, like, stop kicking people. Don't be kicking people. That's
my new life motto. Don't be kicking people.
Don't be doing that. But, like, fucking don't. Like, you don't need to do that. Like, I don't understand why the line is not like, well, is it okay if it's a man? It's like, well, no, if we're talking about, like, violently hurting somebody who annoyed you, then no, the line is, please don't do that at all, full stop, no matter what their gender is, or like what they identify as, or whatever. Like, it doesn't fucking matter.
Unless they show up at your workpplace with flowers and a rose.
Oh, he needed to kick in the head.
Or kick them in the head.
Or if they send you really terrible essays, then I think you can hit them in the head with a shoe. I think that's fine. That's where my line is.
Little Converse.
Anyway. Little Converse. Not a doc. It's not a doc job.
Not a doc job. It's a Converse job.
So, but you do see that, and you do see it on Twitter as well, that a lot of people's responses to the Jessie Lacey thing, like, people I know who are really big fans of Brand New were very quiet about it afterwards. And whether you privately listen to it, again, I think there's a lot of moral issues that aren't as black and white as, I'm going to stop doing this. And like, people have different lines and stuff. I feel like the line should always be, I'm not going to publicly support this thing, because I feel like if it was your friend, or if it was somebody you know in your personal life, I feel like you can, you know, there's nobody saying you have to stop talking to them. But you have to think about how it looks if you talk to them publicly, or if you publicly say, hey, I still support you, or like, you know, I'm going to keep buying your music, or you're going to keep saying whatever, that you're telling people who see you do this that you think what they did is acceptable.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think in your private life, if you're like, well, my friend did a shitty thing, or like, this musician friend I have has been accused of this thing, and I don't know if it's true or not, I feel like if you quietly want to stay and support them, then that's your own prerogative. Like, I don't think you can judge people for, well, you can, you absolutely can, you should, but I feel like there is more of a moral line.
Definitely. It's even when it comes to the whole, even just veering out of the emo sphere for a sec, and one of the great loves of mine when I was, 12 into 15, say, was Chris Brown. Really, really loved him, really loved his music. It was the first concert I'd ever gone to. And when the whole thing with Rihanna happened, I remember I had like a Chris Brown fan page on Stardoll. Like, this is how long ago it is.
Stardoll.
But I immediately I didn't know what the word feminist was. Feminist was a dirty word to me when I was 15, 16.
Yeah.
But I still knew that this is so wrong, and I should absolutely step back and not publicly support him anymore. And I definitely did that, and I kind of stepped away from listening to his music. I think he came to play in Ireland not so long after, or at least he attempted to, and it was in like Vicar Street, which he had gone from playing the 3 Arena to Vicar Street, which just goes to show the impact that had. And I think it got pulled in the end because he couldn't get into the country. But sooner after that, he was back in the 3 Arena again. And I still, to this day, I'm so shocked by people who are feminist who outright would still support him.
Yeah.
I just don't get it. And the same goes for, I guess, what you're saying. Like, yeah, if you listen to him behind the scenes, like, yeah, I'll absolutely judge you for it, but don't support him publicly, because, again, you're condoning what he's done.
And you're telling your friends that, oh, if this happens to you, and it happens to be somebody that I know, that I'm fine with it.
Exactly.
And it's really shitty. And it just has a wider impact than just the music. And a lot of the subreddits I was reading was like, well, I can support whoever I want. And there were some of them seem to be male. It's really, obviously you can't tell on Reddit, there's no pictures, you're going by names.
Yeah.
So people who seem to be male were kind of saying, well, it's not about that. It's about, like, the record label are doing this stuff, and it's about, like, a wider community thing, and it's about what you support and what you're willing to support. And they were saying, like, personally, this is where I draw the line, or personally, I won't support anybody who supported this band, or I'd think twice about supporting them. And I think that's kind of all you can ask people to do, is to think twice about what it is you're doing.
Yeah.
And, like, consider the wider implications of saying, well, I still want to go see this. Like, I remember when Chris Brown came back here, and the people that I saw tweeting, like, that it's okay, or, like, tweeting, like, Rihanna jokes that were really distasteful, or, like, saying, you know, it will be okay if Chris hit them, and, like, just really disturbing, alarming stuff.
There's a lot of disturbing stuff going around about that, like, you know, like, oh, she deserved it, was, you know, and there's people as well who do openly support him as an artist, but then you look at I remember looking at the police report, and it's not okay to support that kind of behaviour.
No, absolutely not.
And even I would, like, yeah, again, as we said, like, there's, you know, the idea of if you're going to listen to them in private and not support them publicly, but these people are supporting him so publicly and so, and they're condoning it. They're condoning it because I think, yes, emo music is kind of a niche thing, but Chris Brown is like, that whole incident, like, that, when that happened, that was like a signifier in pop culture. That was something that I think that was the first time that ever really happened in pop culture, where we had, obviously there was, I mean, like, if you look back at Tina and Ike Turner and all those kind of things that happened, yes, but I'm talking about in kind of modern day social media, kind of where
early
we have
2000s,
access to these things where people should know better.
Yeah,
you know?
and like the photos did rounds, and like, you know, obviously that's an invasion of privacy, and that's a whole issue in itself. But the fact is, we had access to the actual photos, which are actual evidence of the fact that this incident happened.
Yeah.
And I think now, you know, we have people coming forward and saying this band or this guy in this band did this thing to me. We have it there. And the bands, if they apologize, you're like, well, you're saying sorry because you fucking did it.
Yeah.
Or you did something that, like, there is truth in this allegation. And then to have people still say, like, I'm going to support them, I'm still, you know, fuck this, and I'm not saying anything until there's a lawsuit or there's an actual case or until they're charged or whatever. But, like, we mentioned Ian Watkins earlier, there are still people out there who are okay with, and, like, there's women who go and visit him in jail, and you're like, that, what the fuck
goth women is what the newspaper has reported them as. Goth women who's going to see him.
And it's alarming, and it's alarming to think that it may be like a cultural issue that's quite widespread that we haven't really managed to address properly, and it's figuring out where it comes from. And is it coming from the lyrics? Is it coming from our whole attitude? Is this leftover things from the 70s when, like, sex, drug, and rock and roll, sex, drug, and rock and roll, one drug, when sex, drugs, and rock and roll were the pinnacle of rock music? Like, is this leftover? Are we still in that, and we just haven't really realized?
Yeah.
And, like, I suppose there's all stuff with, like, groupies, and even, like, the word groupies makes my skin crawl a little bit because it's so dehumanizing. like, you know, you can be a girl who likes to have sex, and you can be a girl who wants to have sex with band guys. Like, there's a Tumblr, and it's called Band Whores Anon, and they're like self-proclaimed band whores who go around and they sleep with guys from bands, and whether it's true or not, I don't know. I found it really interesting to read.
Yeah.
But they'd be like, oh, I had sex with this guy, or I slept with this guy, and you know, this is the story on him, and people would submit stuff that they'd heard, or like they'd heard from their friends, and there's a whole culture of girls who like to have sex with band guys, and
Oh yeah.
more power to them. If that's what you want to do, that's fine. Like,
Yeah.
I've heard stories from people who work with bands, and they're like, oh, girls come to me all the time and ask, can you introduce me to this guy, or can you like get me backstage, or can you get me into like their private area if they're in a club or whatever. So it does happen, it's real, but it is kind of a dehumanizing thing of like, these are women who want to be used, I think, is kind of the general attitude.
Yeah.
And like, there's very little distinction between fangirls and groupies, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I think when people talk about them, it's all this horrible, disdainful, like, you know, you talk about a groupie, you're talking about like an 18-year-old girl, or like a barely legal girl who like dresses up to look older than she is, and you know, there's all these like mental images that are associated with them, that seem to just all come back to a culture that needs to work a little bit harder at calling out the shit that they're seeing. And we're getting there. We're definitely getting there.
Yeah.
But there is still that thing, like that resistance of people going, well, this doesn't affect me, or this, I don't see this as a problem.
Because it doesn't affect them. Yeah, definitely. And I think as well, like, we need to come right into a point where the culture is more accepting of women.
Yeah.
Which is the bottom line of, I guess, what we're trying to talk about today. Is that we need to be, you know, you can't, there's a campaign here at the moment in Ireland about sports, and it's called 2020, and their whole thing is, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And it's about increasing coverage of women's sports and attendance at women's games by 20% by 2020. And their tagline is, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And I absolutely agree with that sense, in that if you don't see women on stage doing their thing, and you don't see, you know,
women working on record labels,
yeah,
or women working in like touring with bands, or women that are there as managers, or
yeah,
whatever, like if you can't see it, I mean, like you look at like band culture, and when people get really into a band, they learn who all the crew are.
Yeah.
Like if you don't see women, that's not an option for you.
Exactly.
And I think it's no different than going like, women can be scientists. Like, we've moved on from that. We know women can be scientists. And
women are brilliant scientists.
Yeah, exactly. And even though, obviously, I mean, this is a segue, but the girl who created the program for the black hole to be imaged,
woman.
Yes, the girl was a woman. the girl was in fact a woman. Shock. But the response from a lot of like, you know, straight white guys was, a woman can't have done this. So then they were like, well, this white man did it, and he was like, I'm a gay white man, and they were like, oh no, we have to find somebody else. So they were like really trying to say that there's no way she could have done this, and I do think that is, we're met with that everywhere. Like it's still something that we're working on culturally. Everywhere in the world, that is still an issue, that women still have to work harder, and like, but then you're talking, like, that's white women, like black women have to work harder, Latino women have to work harder, disabled people have to work harder, like there's all this like still massive inequality, but it really does come down to that, like if you can't see it, you can't be it. If we don't have these successful bands that have money pumped into them, like I've never seen a girl band or a female fronted band have money pumped into them the way I did with Palais Royale. Like I wouldn't, like, you know, if I opened an email and was like, this is your next favorite band, and it had girls in it, I would probably be more likely to click on it.
Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Because you're like, well, even if it's manufactured shit, like somebody sat down in a boardroom and thought, young girls want to listen to this, and they made up a thing that they thought young people wanted to listen to, and it happened to be this all-female group, or it happened to be this female-fronted thing, or it happened to have a guitarist who is a girl, or a drummer, or like whatever. I don't think it matters really, but it's the fact that that's still not happening. We're still seeing all-male bands, and I'm kind of fucking sick of it.
Yeah, same. Straight white man. I'm kind of sick of it too. It's like the majority of bands have taken, I guess, the whole 4 men playing 4 different instruments from the Beatles. Like that's kind of come down from there, that kind of structure, and it just hasn't gone away. Whereas we need more diversity in that.
Definitely. But even back to Fall Out Boy, their earliest albums were written by Pete, were about a girl called Janae White, and she was like the scene queen. Like if you remember, like Jack Vanek, and like Janae was one, and I can't think of any other names, but they were all the girls that you'd see all over MySpace that people would use their like images or whatever. And like Pete had written or he'd done an interview, sorry, in a Rolling Stone spread saying that like she's irresistible, the best ones are crazy, there are parts of me that are like, yeah, we could get married, and then there's parts of me that couldn't spend tonight with her. I don't know that she cares about the songs as much as everybody who listens to them does, and it's back to that thing of like,
she doesn't like us, so I want her to like us.
yeah, and it's, you know, we're songs about girls that are not for girls, and yeah, like we somehow still persevered.
Yeah,
and I think that's really interesting. I think that's testimony to like teenage stubbornness more than anything else. But I like, you think emo, you think female groups of people. And like I guess that's like, now I'm kind of like, well, that's really, you know, exclusionary. Like obviously non-binary people, and like there's more than two genders.
Yeah.
You know, if we've moved on from that, but it kind of conjure a picture of like groups of girls who are really passionate about something. I just think we need to work a little bit more.
Yes, we do. So that's all we have for this week. Thank you so much for tuning in.
I hope you enjoyed, or that it gave you something to think about. Like, I think this was an episode that we needed to do, and that we needed to address.
Yeah.
But that we hope didn't. I mean, fuck it. If you got offended by it, I don't give a shit. Like, this is stuff we needed to talk about, and it's an issue that's there for a lot of like women and for a lot of like non-binary people or like trans people as well. That this is stuff they've been subjected to their whole lives, and I think it's really important to
talk about the lack of diversity and the lack of
awareness.
Yeah.
And like really challenge it. So we hope you had fun, and rate us on Apple Podcasts if you're
on there, or subscribe to us on Spotify. We also put out playlists for each episode the Thursday before the episode goes out. So every Thursday there'll be a playlist, and every Monday you'll have a new episode. So give us a follow on Spotify. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter at kidsfromyesterdaypod, and we're on Instagram at kidsfromyesterdaypod. And that is where we will give you information and stuff.
Yeah, and also if you have anything you want to say to us, if you want to yell at us, if you want to say something nice to us, you can email us at kidsfromyesterdaypod@gmail.com. I mean, if you yell at us, we're not going to read it out, we're just going to laugh at you. But like, if they're valid yelling points, or you're yelling towards us about something that you agree with, that's cool. We might read it out in a future episode, which could be pretty fun.
That would be cool. And if there's anything you want us to cover that you have noticed about the emo scene, or something that particularly interests you that you'd like to know more about, we can do that research and bring you a podcast.
That's what we do.
That's what we do.
Join our emo cult.